Hey guys, this is Mike Tarallo with Qlik. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use the Twitter data source that is part of the web connectors in Qlik Sense Cloud Business. Now, if you remember from the last video, which I will display here, I talked about the Google Analytics data source, and I gave you a brief demonstration of how that works. Well, I'm going to do the same here with the Twitter connector as well, and I have an example already built, so we're going to click on that example, just to give you an idea of what the finished product could be. And here is my sheet. And I'll clear my selection. And basically this is just pulling back user mentions for the authenticated account. In this case, I used my own Twitter account. So in this case, from the beginning of 2015, now there is a rate limit on the amount of data that you can pull back. In this particular instance, there have been 790 mentions of my particular user account based on various tweets. Some of these that you can see here belong to Qlik Sense, and then some others that other people have retweeted, such as the associative experience and other topics that I've talked about. So just to give you a quick example of what you might use this for, maybe sentiment analysis, looking up various textual analytics within the Twitter universe based off of user accounts, or even search terms that you might want to use. And I'll give you a couple examples of that. So to get started, I'm just going to create a new app. I'll just call it Twitter 2. I'll click Create App. And as I mentioned in the Google Analytics data source video, these connectors are in beta, so at this time they are accessible through the data load editor. So when I'm in the data load editor, I'm just going to create a new tab. We'll call it Twitter, and then I'm going to click on Create New Connection, select Qlik Web Connectors, and then from the source type, I'm going to choose Twitter, and then Authenticate. Now in this case, I'm going to sign in with my account, and I'm going to grab the pin, and I'm going to paste the pin here and verify. And then the name, we'll just call this Twitter. And create. So this is going to be use the Twitter API under the covers with this data source with the web connectors, and it follows the API resources that are available within Twitter. So for example, there is Twitter development documentation that you can follow to learn more, and I'll reference this in a few moments when I show you where those links are. Okay, so right in this area here, I'm going to select the data icon, and you can see that there's a number of different, they call them tables in this example here, but what you're doing here is you're actually invoking various endpoints within the Twitter API. So for example, the one that I showed you in the beginning with those charts was using mentions. Okay, and you can see this uses the API endpoint to return up to 800 most recent mentions, tweets containing a user's screen name for the authenticated user. Okay, and then each request to the API can return up to 200 results, and 75 of these requests per rate limit. Okay, there is documentation here that you can click, and it talks about the resource URL, the parameters that are optional, and so forth. And when you go into this area here, you will see that there's something called Sense ID, Max ID. Okay, to make a long story short with these are basically here to reduce redundancy. Because a timeline can have so many tweets, and because it is constantly updating, when using traditional paging, you could actually get a lot of redundant results coming back. So this helps limit that. I'm not going to pretend that I'm an expert on this, but you can look up more with the working in timeline section. And here, this is part of the Twitter documentation. It talks about the problem with pages, the Max ID parameter, as well as the Sense ID parameter. Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm not going to go into this greatly here. This is more API developer type documentation, but if you read through this, you'll have a general understanding of how to use it. Now in my case here, I don't really have to enter any of those parameters. There's also Searched Advanced. This basically returns all of the columns that would be available for searching a particular query. And you can see the various parameters here: search query, max number of search pages, the Sense ID, language, geocode parameters. Search is the same as Search Advanced. It just returns a limited number of columns. You can see table contains a minimal set of columns likely to be useful. And then there's the user search query. And this is basically a topic of interest. You can put anything within the search query and it'll search across the various usernames, locations, tweets, etc. and it'll pull back that information. Now keep in mind, when you pull back this data, you have to take into consideration any of the rate limits imposed by Twitter. Okay, so just to do a simple one, we're just going to grab mentions. Okay, and I'm not going to enter those parameters. I'm just going to click preview. We get back our columns, and I'm going to click insert script and then load data. And click close. Then I'll go to the app overview, create a new sheet. And then I'll just create a simple bar chart. Okay, and for the dimension in this case here, we can do, let's say user, let's see if they have a username. And as a measure, we can take a count of ID. So you can see the number of mentions in this case here. Okay, so at this point here, we have click, and then there's various other users here that have mentioned my name within the Twitter universe. And that's just giving an example of how many times those names were mentioned by those particular individuals for, let's say, particular tweets. Okay, so other than that, that's all I can really tell you. It's fairly simple. I would suggest that you look at the Twitter documentation we're directed within the connector to learn more about the parameters. And I encourage you to post any comments or questions where this video is posted so we can learn more about your needs. Other than that, also check out these fine resources to learn more about ClickSense and ClickSense Cloud. And join the conversation with me and others in the Click community. Okay, I'll see you on the next video.